Hi, everyone. Oh, let's see the recording. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz of Cake Be Merry, and I'm here with Satin today, and we're going to be making a buttercream monster cake. It's perfect for Halloween. It's easy enough to do with your kiddos or just have a fun time with friends making these little individual cakes. And we're going to be using a variety of products that you can get at Michael's. There'll be some fondant, some buttercream frosting, edible glue, stuff like that. But I'll show you everything as we get started. But I hope you are excited to make this monster cake, and I'm excited to make it with you. So let's begin. So I'm just going to flip over my camera so you guys can see what I'm working with right here. All right, perfect. All right, so today we will be again making our monster cake, and the cake will be covered in buttercream, but we will be making a lot of accents like the eyeballs, the horns, and the mouth and stuff out of fondant. So hopefully you were able to grab these colors, but if not, feel free to use any other colors you want and kind of make the monster your own. I will be kind of going through the different elements, but feel free if you want to make it a little like cutesy or if you want to make it a little scarier or whatnot. It's a very flexible project. So you can follow exactly along, or if you want to add your own spin to it, feel free to do so as well. Okay, so one thing about this class is we have a limited amount of time, and I want to show you a really good trick on how to make fondant dry a little bit quicker. And you can use this in your everyday, cake decorating as well. Say you don't have enough time to have things sit for hours to dry, you can always use something like a CMC powder. And we're going to be kneading that into our fondant to allow it to dry a little faster as well as a little firmer. So that'll be really good for our decorations, especially the horns, because something like this, it could take overnight to dry if you don't use the CMC powder. But with the powder mixed in, we can get it to be a lot firmer much quicker. So we have that. We have some edible glue that we'll be layering our eyeballs with. And then if you were able to get the little cookie cutter set or the fondant cutter set, here are 3 different rounds that we'll be using. Now, if you don't have it, it's totally fine because we can just make rounds by making balls and flattening them down. So if you weren't able to get the cutters, no problem at all. And then we also have a multi-opening tip. And this is a fairly large tip compared to the smaller piping tips you might be used to. But this is great because it gets a lot more coverage faster, and the holes here are really large. This is tip number 234. There is a smaller version, but that will take forever to pipe all the texture on. So try to get the large one if you're able to. And this really creates a fun, fluffy texture for our monster. We also have some white fondant. And then we have our buttercream frosting in purple. Now, if you chose to use a different color, that would be super cool too. When I was making this, the picture for the class, I had a hard time deciding, should I make it blue, orange, green, purple? I settled on purple, but feel free to do it in other colors because this will look super cute. In any shade. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is make our accents because we need those things to dry while we're doing all the other things. So we'll first open up our fondant packs. So go ahead and you can do this along with me. I'm just going to cut the packs open. And then one by one, we'll knead in some of that CMC powder. And these little packs of fondant are so convenient, especially if you don't need to like cover a whole cake or anything. You just need it for little accents. Then these packs are great because it's 4.4 ounces. And then you could just break off what you need, pack it up, wrap it with plastic wrap, or put it in a Ziploc bag, and then use it later. So really convenient. We probably will be using about half the pack of each one, just to let you know. And if we need more, we can grab more later. But for now, let's go ahead and try to get a little bit of each color. So here's the orange. And then we have the black, and then we'll also need a little bit of the white, but we'll do that last. Okay, now the black, let's go a little bit, this maybe about a third, because these we're going to be making the horns out of, so we need most of. And then the white, we don't need too much of either. Maybe about the same amount as black. Now I just cut the black with my knife. And before I go into the white, I just want to make sure to wipe it off just in case any of the black gets on the white. And then after you've done that, some of it. Really just like this much. I got some of the orange on there from my fingers too, but that's a good amount. Right now we're gonna close this back up. One thing is when you're putting your fondant away, you don't want it to be exposed to air or it can kind of start to dry and form a crust. So you always want to make sure that your containers are tightly closed. And same thing with these packs, you want to make sure that you want to minimize the air. So I would wrap this in plastic wrap or put it into a zip top bag so none of the air gets in there. All right, so we have our fondant and let's go ahead and grab the CMC powder. You'll notice it just looks like that. And there's no real like ratio in terms of how much to add, but I like to start just adding little by little. So I'll just grab maybe about that much and start kneading my fondant. And then I'm going to knead that powder into the fondant as well. So you can just push the fondant into it and it'll start to absorb that CMC powder. All right, so now you can see, and as we incorporate it, it'll start activating. And you can kind of tell as it gets firm if you need more or less powder. Because right now you could see that it's super soft, but as you start adding the powder, you'll notice like it gets a little bit more firm as you're working it. So you'll be able to feel when it gets firm. Now, the more you add, the more firmer it'll get. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want it too hard, then don't put too much. But let's just add a little bit more. Again, just knead it through. And you could do this on the table as well with your wrist. All right, so that one, I'm just gonna let it sit for a minute. Oh, and before we go to the next step, I wanted to mention, so you guys have a minute to do so. I forgot to add into the supply list a small rolling pin. So if you want to just go grab that while we're kneading this CMC into these, go ahead. We're just going to need, if even if you have a large one, that's one fine. But a small rolling pin, if you don't have any rolling pins, you can go grab like a wine bottle or like a cup that has a flat edge. Anything will really work. So please go ahead and do that, and apologies. All right, so now on to our next color. Just gonna knead it so that it's a little smooth. Right, and then we could add some of the CMC powder to here. And one thing that's helpful to know that the kind of consistency of fondant can differ according to your environment. So if you feel like your fondant is a little too like sticky, you can always use a little cornstarch and add that in and it'll make it less sticky. If it's too hard and dry, you can knead in a little bit of shortening and that'll rehydrate it a little. So always know that there is a way to adjust the consistency of your fondant if you feel like you're having some trouble with it. Not just environment, but also like, different times of the year, it can kind of change. All right, so this is good to go. So I'm just gonna keep that right here for a second as I move on. So I'm gonna do the black last just because it'll probably get a little bit messier than the other ones. So I'll just move on to the green and then last we'll do the black. So with this one as well, I just wanna grab a little bit of that powder and knead that in. Now, if you've seen CMC powder before at the store, like at Michael's shelves, and you didn't know how to use it or what the function of it was, I hope that's one thing you can leave this class with, that this is really helpful to kind of turn your fondant into something similar to gum paste. So if you've ever made like sugar flowers before, this is really good. If you don't have gum paste, or even if you do have gum paste, you could add this to gum paste to make it even dry even more quickly and firm. So that'll help you when you're making like thin petals that you want to arrange quickly. This powder will help you. Right, so let's collect all the powder that's on here, knead it in. And when I usually work with fondant, I like to roll it into a ball whenever I'm not actively using it. So if I was going to let this rest for a longer time, I would have like a piece of plastic wrap and then maybe like a wet paper on towel on top. You don't want the paper towel to actually touch the fondant because it can melt it, but just something so that air doesn't hit it. But we'll be using it pretty soon. That's why I'm just leaving it. But I do roll them into balls so there's less surface area for it to kind of dry. All right, I'm just going to wipe my hands a little bit so I don't get any of the other colors onto the black. All right, so here is our last color. Okay, and let's add CMC to that. Now, the black fondant is going to be your softest fondant. Because of the saturation of color and stuff like that, it is a little softer than like white or the lighter colors. So the really dark saturated colors tend to be a little bit softer. So if you need to use a bit more powder with that, go ahead and do that. Now it's really starting to look like Halloween, right? This color palette, I feel like, is such a playful one. It's very approachable and it's fun. And it's visually, it just catches you, especially with like the purple buttercream. So fits right in with the theme of Halloween. Okay, so let's get everything together. All the powder. Right. And hopefully everyone was able to grab a small rolling pin because we will be using that next. Okay, let me wipe this off as well. And I'll give you a moment to clean your space as well as wipe your hands too, if you need to. All right, so for the next step, we're going to be needing that rolling pin as well as some cornstarch. And then hopefully you have a small knife available near you. It can just be something like this or like an X-Acto knife, anything that'll help you cut out the shape of the mouth. Okay, and we're going to be rolling most of this into thin sheets, except some of the orange and green we'll be making the horns with. So let's go ahead and actually begin with the horns. So that is like the thickest item we have. So we'll need the most time for that to dry. And then cornstarch. I have this little bag pouch that kind of distributes cornstarch. This is really cool. All right, so go ahead and grab maybe like this much of orange. Like you want most of it. We'll only leave a few details otherwise. So same thing with the green. We'll take most of the green. Now split that into 2 balls. Okay, and let's make this a little bit more even. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to knead it into a small ball. Try to push as tight as you can so the fondant is really compact. Okay, So we'll do something like that. And then I'm going to start elongating it and creating a narrow point at one end. So it's going to start looking like this. All right, almost like a carrot. So let's go ahead and do that with the next one. I'm just going to knead it before I roll it into a ball, just to make it a little bit soft again. Okay, and once you have a ball, same thing, you want to shape it into this carrot form. We're going to be doing the same thing with the green as well. Don't you just love how vibrant this green is? It's so cute. All right, so we'll roll this into a tight ball. Okay, and once you have that, create your cone shape. And here's our last one. Knead it. Really squish it to like condense and compact the fondant. Roll it into a ball and then into a cone. All right, so we should have something like this. And I'm going to put a little cornstarch on my hand. If you feel like the fondant's getting stickier or anything, that's cornstarch is always great to use. All right, so you're going to grab one of the oranges and one of the greens. We're going to put them right beside each other. And we're going to try to squeeze them together. It's still soft enough so that it should stick, but if not, you can use a little bit of water or the edible glue to adhere them. But right now, we just did it, so they're still sticky enough. So I'll just go ahead and stick both of them together. So it should look like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to twist this. So one hand should be going this way and the other the opposite way. Ooh, so maybe I twisted too hard. But so we're going to twist it like this. And then we're going to squeeze and keep twisting. And if it cracks, you can just push together. Okay, and you can create as big of a spiral or as small as you want. This is good for me. And then I'm just going to cut off the top because we really only need a little bit of that cone. All right. And then before I let it dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape the horn the way that I want. So I'm going to twist it a little bit more on the top. And then instead of being straight up, I'm going to kind of shape it so that one side comes in and the other side will come in the other way. All right, so now let's do that with the next one. Okay, I'm going to squeeze these together as I twist so that they kind of, really interlock and adhere well. Once you have something like that, again, you want to make sure this is about the same size. So go ahead and compare it to your first one. Give it a cut. Squeeze this back together. Okay. And once you have that, I'm going to shape this to go a little bit inward as well. Let me make it a bit smoother. Okay, and go ahead and play around with this. It's just really fun to be able to make little accents like this. So if you want to twist the top even more to make it pointy, you could do that. All up to you. Okay, so these are approximately the same size. This one looks a little thicker, so I'm just going to narrow it down a little bit. Okay, and that looks really fun. All right, so I'm just going to let these dry a little bit. But at this point, if you want to, you can grab two toothpicks. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this right into the middle of the horn. Try not to put it in too much or else the toothpick will come out the other end. We just want it to dry on here so that we can stick it into our cake later. Same thing with this one. Push it in. All right, now the final thing is, you can see right here, I'm going to make it a little bit flat. So I'm just going to take my palm and push it down just a little bit. That'll really allow the toothpick to get stuck, and also it'll dry a little faster since we're increasing the surface area by making it a little flat. So it should look like this. And now I'm just going to put this off to the side so we don't touch it or disturb it so that it can really have time to dry. But if it's a little bit moist, hit it with some cornstarch, and we can brush this off after, but also the cornstarch will absorb that moisture and allow it to dry a little bit quicker. It'll kind of work together with the CMC powder to give us faster drying time. All right, so let's put that off to the side, and here are some samples in case it doesn't dry by the end of the class. But we can always let it sit a little bit longer and add that later. Okay, so we have this, and we can use this for other things. You can mix it to make a new color, or if you want to use it for details later, just keep it in a plastic bag so that it doesn't dry out. Okay, and then with our other stuff, again, I'm going to knead it real quick. And now put some cornstarch on my surface and roll this out so that it's pretty thin. Maybe about 1/8 of an inch thin, or just like a sheet. It doesn't have to be exact. But with this, I'm just going to grab my cutters and cut some random sizes because we're going to use that as part of the monster's like spots. So if you want a few of those. And for the green, you can make a few as well, but we are going to be using the green for the eyeballs too. So we do need this medium size. Some cornstarch, and that'll help the fondant not stick to the board. Roll this out as well. All right, so we're going to need 2 of the medium-sized circle for the eyeballs. Okay, and then the rest of it, you can go ahead and create random sizes also for the spots. And if you want to put some spots on the sides of your cake, you can go ahead and cut some more. So I'll just cut a few more of the orange so that we can have some more to play with. Okay, that should be enough. Okay, and with any scraps, again, knead it together, put it in a plastic bag so that it doesn't dry out. You can always reuse fondant if it's not dried. Okay, and now we're going to go on to, let's do the black next. Actually, yeah, let's do the white just because we don't want any of the black to get on the white. So I'm just going to wipe my hands. Okay, dry. And let's move all our things out of the way. Okay, because we don't want any of those little scraps from the other colors getting into our white. I'm going to knead the white. If you're feeling it, you can feel how like the surface of the fondant is already starting to dry out a little, and that will really help us get these things a little bit harder by the end of this class. All right, so here we have the white. Just going to roll it out. We're going to be using this for the eyes as well as the teeth. So we're going to need 2 of the large circles, and then we're just going to be hand cutting the teeth. So again, it's sticking a little, so a little bit more cornstarch. Put some on top as well. All right, so here is the large round. There's 1. There's 2. Okay, and now we're going to do the teeth. Let me move this up just a little. Okay, and for the teeth, you can kind of just make random like triangles. We're just going to be making a bunch of different sizes. So it doesn't have to be exact. I'm just going to crisscross it so we get all these little angles. And then I'll just show you. Once you do that, it'll look like this. And then we can cut off the little triangles so we have different size teeth. You want some to be long and some to be short. Okay, and if you want more teeth, you can cut more. If you want less, you can cut less. But again, I'm just kind of crisscrossing my lines to create those little angles. And it creates a lot at once. So that's really good. All right, same with your white. Let's just ball that up so that it doesn't dry out and put it in a plastic bag. Okay, and the last thing we need is the black. So again, let's make a little bit more room. And I'm going to knead this together. You'll notice, like, because of the CMC, it's starting to really dry fast, and that's how fast it works. That's why you're seeing the crumbles. If you didn't have any of the CMC powder in there, it would still be like really, really soft and pliable. Okay, so this one we're going to need to create our mouth as well as the inside of our eyeballs with. So you can grab your knife, and how you make the mouth is totally up to you. So here I have some examples. I have one that's more like a traditional big smile, and then I have one that's a little bit more curved to give more of like a wonky monster smile. So you can go ahead and do whichever kind you want. I'm just going to take my knife and cut my shape, but try to make your mouth a little bit big because we do want to put like the teeth on there and we want it to be pretty visible. And don't worry, if your shape is not exactly how you want it, if you didn't cut it the way that you want it, it doesn't matter because you can kind of shape it once we put the buttercream on too. So just kind of, enjoy the process and have fun. And then we're going to make small circles for the black. Okay. And I always like to have like one or two extra of something just in case, it breaks or whatever. While I have this all rolled out, it just makes it easier to have extras. Also, if you're making more than one cake or if you have a bunch of people doing it together, it'd be really good to have like one person work on one color and another person work on the next. All right, so we have all of our cutouts here. So we have our mouth, we have, let's just try to organize what will be with what. We have our teeth. We have our eyeballs that are going to have green in the middle and then black on top. So this is extra. Maybe this is all extra as well. So these are the spots that we'll be using for decorating. This is just extra. These are for our eyeballs, mouth, and teeth. So hopefully you have everything here. All right. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some of the teeth on the mouth with the edible glue. So go ahead and grab your glue, as well as if you have a small brush, that'll be really helpful, just so we can kind of apply it onto our teeth without it kind of spreading too much. All right, and feel free to clear out your space a little bit for the next part. So I have a brush right here, and we're done with the cornstarch. We are done with the CMC powder, as well as all our little cutters. So we could put those away. And now bring in your edible glue and your brush. I always like to kind of clean as I go when I'm making cakes or cookies or cupcakes, because as you probably know, mess can snowball real quick when you're working on a project. So it just kind of helps to tidy up your space so that you can move on to the next part and have, a lot of room to do so. All right, so for this, I'm going to move my camera a little bit closer because teeth are so small. Okay. And we're also going to glue the eyeballs too, but we'll do that in a minute. Okay, so grab your edible glue. There's a seal inside, so if it's new, make sure you've removed that. Oh, and one thing to do before, just make sure that it kind of, you have enough space. I made my mouth pretty big, so I'm seeing like on the actual cake, I might overtake it a little bit too much. So it will be a little bigger because we're going to be adding the buttercream on the sides as well. But I'm just thinking this might be a little bit too big, so I can just trim it so that it fits a bit better. I think that'll be good. But again, if you need to trim it later, you can too. But just kind of referencing the size of your cake will be helpful. All right, so here I have my glue. And if you're working on bigger things that you need to attach, you can definitely just like dab it on. But because our teeth are so small, I want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on my cutting mat and then just brush it on. Otherwise, if there's too much glue, it'll seep out and you'll be able to see it. All right, so grab one of your teeth and turn it upside down and apply a thin layer of glue. Again, if you put too much, it'll kind of show through. Right, and we're just going to place it along the mouth wherever we want. So here's my next one. And feel free to go between small and big teeth. Now the small one's really small, so I might just apply the glue directly on here for that one because it's so tiny. And then just keep going. If you want to put some gaps in your teeth, you can as well. So maybe this one, I'll give it a little bit of space. And then you want to make sure to do the bottom as well. I'll put some teeth down here. And over here. Let's get the edges as well. I feel like the teeth really give the monster personality. So this is the fun part for sure. Yeah, I'll put just a few more. But feel free to put as many as you want, many or as little. A little straighter. And a small one right there. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna spin this tooth so it's standing up a little bit more vertically so I can cut off the edge of that tooth. All right, now the only thing we have left to do is let this dry and then we can move on to our eyeballs. So let's move that aside and bring in our eyeballs. Okay. So for this one, we're going to be using the white as the background. We're going to be layering the green on top and then a little bit of the black. So I'll grab more of that glue. And so when it comes to the pupils, you can feel free to play around with it. If you want your eyeballs to look like that, or if you want it to look like that, or if you want the eyeballs straight in the middle, I feel like having a little bit of that difference and playing around with it really gives another layer of character to the monster. So I think I want mine to, like, one to go this way and one to go that way. So I will glue that on. And feel free to kind of make it silly because this is a silly cake. It's a silly monster. So you can have a little bit of fun with how you place things. All right. And once you place the green in, then we're going to want to come in with the black. So again, with this, you can place it in the middle, off to the side, wherever you want. Just play around with it. Right. And if you want to test it, you can kind of, before committing with the glue, you can kind of move it around and see what you think will look better. I'm going to put this one on the side over here. All right. Looks super fun already. Okay, and the last thing we're going to need is like a little bit of white in the center of the eyeball, just so it doesn't look so dark. So you can I'll just use one of the teeth, but if you want to grab more white fondant, you can, but really we just need a little bit of white fondant for each. I'm just gonna roll this into a small ball and then flatten it just a tiny bit, and then we'll just add it onto our eyes. So again, here's one, and then knead it just a little with your fingers to make it smooth. Roll it into a ball, push it down so that it's just a little bit flat. Okay, and then you could place it on your eyeballs. So we'll put it right on top of this black fondant. Give it a little push. All right, now that looks really fun. So you can imagine what this is going to look like with our teeth and our eyeballs and our little spots that'll go all over. It's already coming together. But now we're going to work on our cake since we have all our elements. So don't forget, we also have the horns here. I'll just kind of assemble everything how it will go on the cake so that later when we bring it back out, we have everything ready to go. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna move this camera up so we could work on the cake now. Right, so this whole thing, I'm just gonna make sure that it's flat, and I'm just gonna move it off to the side and let it dry while we're working on the cake part. Let's shift it all the way back here. And remember to close your glue so that it doesn't dry out. Okay, perfect. So we'll stay over there. And then we can put our fondant and stuff away. All right, so for the next part, you're gonna want your buttercream, your purple or whatever color that you decided to go with. You're gonna need that. You're gonna need a piping bag. You're gonna need scissors, as well as some kind of spatula to scoop up the buttercream and tip 234. So here I have that, as well as a piping bag. You're just gonna need one piping bag, but I got two just in case. Let me see. All right, so once you open it, your buttercream is all ready to go. So this is, you don't have to, mix it or do anything with it. It's really ready, straight out of the bucket into a bag, and you're good to go. That's what makes it so convenient and easy. And these come in so many different colors, like a huge array. So super easy. All right, so we're gonna need to fill our piping bag with some of this buttercream. So what you want to do, if you've never filled a piping bag before with a tip, I'll just teach you right here. So first, you just want to make a cut in your piping bag because we want this opening to come out of the bag. And then you can place your piping tip inside. You want to make sure you push it all the way down. Now, I didn't cut enough, so I'll just push it back and cut a bit more. Now that's much better than cutting too much and then the piping tip just flying out. So try to cut modestly when it comes to piping bags if possible, because you can always recut, but you can't undo it. All right, so once I have that in the bottom, I'm taking my thumbs and kind of really stretching that plastic and forming it to the base of that piping tip so that it doesn't go anywhere. Because sometimes if it's not really tight in there, while you're piping, the tip can actually go back in the bag. We want to make sure that it stays where it's supposed to. So that's why I like to tighten that part. Okay, and now to actually fill the bag, what I'm going to do is grab the top and puff it over. And that'll give us a clean way to add our buttercream into the bag. Now, I have my hand in this shape of a C on one end of the cuff, and that's going to help me hold the bag. And then with the other hand, we can scoop. But before I do, I'm just going to stir this up gently. You don't have to stir it up too much, but I like to just make sure everything is well incorporated and loaded onto my spatula. And then I can grab that piping bag and just place it inside. I'm just going to push it down so that I have more room to add more buttercream. Try not to overfill it, but you still want a good amount in there. All right, so that seems pretty good. If we need more, we can always refill the bag, but it's best not to have like too much buttercream because if it's all the way up here, it'll gush out while you're piping. Like we don't want the buttercream to come out. We want it to stay in the bag. So what we're going to do is twist the top where the buttercream ends and then clamp it with our thumb and our pointer finger. And that'll give us a really good a really good filled bag. And as we squeeze, the buttercream will come out this way and not out the top. All right, so here is my bag that's already prepared with the piping tip. And that again is the multi-opening large tip. And so now I can bring my cake in. So here I have a 6-inch cake. I actually cut it into 2 layers just so I can have some buttercream in between. But if you just have one thick layer, totally fine. That's completely up to your preference. I just thought it'd be fun to have a little bit of that buttercream inside as well. So what I'm going to do first is you can take your spatula and place a little dab of buttercream in the middle of your plate or your cake board or whatever, your cake stand, whatever you're using, because that will allow your cake to really adhere to the surface. And I'm just going to press down the center. So now the cake's not really going anywhere. Sometimes if you don't add that buttercream on the bottom, it can shift. We don't want it to do that. So that little bit of buttercream really helps kind of act as the glue. Okay, now we're going to add a thin layer of buttercream. Again, if you only have 1 layer of cake, that's a bit thicker, totally fine. I just cut mine in half so I can have a little bit of the buttercream inside. Now I'm just going to spread it out. Go all the way to the edges. Right, on all sides. I always like to go from the center out. And always try to push your buttercream. Otherwise, if you pull it back, the crumbs from your cake will get into your buttercream, and you want to avoid that. So always smooth it without kind of like dragging the crumbs back in, like right there. So I'm going to put a little bit more there to cover it up. Great. Just try to get it to the edge as close as possible. It doesn't need to be perfect because we will be just pushing the second layer on top, and that'll allow our buttercream to go closer to the edge. All right, so here I have my second layer. When I put this on top, I'm going to flip it. So this is where I cut it, but we always want like the smoother side to be on top. So I'll just place that right there and then give that a little push too. If you have any crumbs, go ahead and clean it up. All right, and we are almost ready to pipe. Okay, now it might be hard to see the sides, but I'll try to tilt it over when we start piping so you can see what's going on there. But we'll start on the top first. So you can grab your piping bag. And I'm just gonna grab a wet towel. Okay, got some buttercream on my hands, so I just wanted to get that off. All right, so let's go ahead and move all the crumbs because if there's crumbs laying around and it gets in your bag and stuff, it can actually go back on the cake. So we want to make sure that when we're doing our final like coating of buttercream that your surrounding is really clear. All right, so we have this, and as you squeeze, you can see that all that buttercream is coming out of each individual hole, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to start, you can start from the side or the top, but it might be easiest for you guys to see from the top. So I'm going to squeeze a little bit of that buttercream and pull up gently, and then you'll create like this texture. We're going to go right next to that and do the same thing. I'm just going to go all the way and cover the entire cake. Now, it doesn't all have to be the exact same length, but you want it to be pretty similar. And if you want it more shaggy, you can make it even longer. It's up to you what kind of texture you want to create for your monster. So I'm just holding it straight up, squeezing down, and pulling it up, and it creates all these individual little spikes. And again, you'll see the longer you make it, the more like it'll kind of lay down and create like a shag texture. So whatever you want to go for, go ahead. You can do a combination of both. And also, this is really great because we're just going to be covering the entire cake. So you don't need to necessarily go in circles. If you just want to do work on like one section at a time, like this, and take that all the way to the edge first, you can. As long as you kind of nestle in everything pretty closely, it'll all look cohesive at the end. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to see the texture on your cake as well. And once in a while, when you start piping, you might get some buttercream on the sides of your piping tip. And if it gets like really messy, the buttercream can actually stick to the other buttercream and pull it. So if you need to, go ahead and wipe off your piping tip whenever you want. And this does take a little bit of time, but I feel like the texture that you get at the end is definitely worth it. If you need some help from, your kids or someone else, maybe give them an opportunity to kind of create the texture because it's going to be fun and easy for them too. It's just a great project to do with anyone. All right, so now I'm just continuing to make my way around, and this will be the same for the sides of the cake. At that point, we're just gonna start pulling this way instead of straight up and down. And you could start either way. You could start on the sides, you could start on the top. Either way, it'll look good. So this is very forgiving. And also, if at any point the holes in your piping tip get clogged, it might not create these individual strands. So then at that point, you want to wipe it off as well to make sure that each hole has a bit of clearance so that all the little lines can come out nice and clean. And when I first press down, I'm not touching the cake directly, like the surface. I'm hovering over it just like an eighth of an inch, just a little bit, and that'll allow me to like drop down each line. Okay. And if you see any like big gaps, you can go back in and fill it in if you want. But if you don't, then you can just move on to the sides. And I'm not going to worry too much about this real like edge right here because at the end I'm going to go in and fill it to kind of combine, like connect the sides as well as the top. All right, so now we're doing the same thing on the sides. So I'll show you if I can right there. And once we go through all the sides, then again, we'll come back in this little gap between the top and the sides, and we'll just fill it in like that so you won't even know that it's there. All right, but go ahead and do the sides. If you need to sit, you can, or if you don't have a turntable, it does help to have this a little bit more elevated just so you can see the sides. So if you want to like prop it up on one of the fondant buckets or something, just to have it a little bit higher helps to pipe something like this. You can also use like a Lazy Susan or even like the inside of your microwave, the little spinning dish. You can use that too if you don't have a turntable. just get creative because there's probably some tool in your house that can like have a double function in cake decorating. All right, so I'm going to continue making my way around. If you need to like stretch your wrists or anything, feel free to do so, because I know this can get a little, it can strain a little bit because you're piping so much. So make sure to stretch and rest your wrist if you need to. Okay, and the buttercream itself has a really good consistency. So it's not like too loose or too thick. It's right in between, and it's really allowing the piping to come out nicely. Now, as I'm piping, I could see that I have a little hole in my bag. So as I'm squeezing, there's also buttercream coming out there. So I'm just gonna change my piping bag or double it up real quick, just so it doesn't continue coming out. And that happens sometimes with your tools. Let me try sticking it in another bag, and hopefully that will do the trick. Get this off of the plate. And continue making your way around. Hopefully your bag didn't explode like mine though. All right, I'm almost there. I'm just have a little bit of the cake to go. All right, I think that worked pretty good. So I just put it in another bag, doubled it up so that it doesn't really squeeze out as much. Okay, so here is my last little bit. All right, so now again, we have this gap in between the top and the bottom that you can see, and we're just gonna go and pipe inside there just to cover it up, and that'll give us a complete, like a nicely finished surface for our monster face. Just go all the way around. Great, it's super cute. Hopefully yours looks good too, and if you're finished, you can follow along with me to the next step. But if not, feel free to keep piping. There's, no rush here. You can end at your own pace, follow it at your own pace. But I'm just going to keep going just for the sake of the class. So let me move some of the stuff I don't need again and bring in that tray of accents that we made earlier. We have all these really fun sweet accents. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. Whoop. So I'll move it in a little bit. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouth, kind of just position it, place it where I want it, and now I'm just going to gently press it into the buttercream because I don't want it to like be floating on top. We want it to look like it's like a seamless part of the face. Let's go ahead and press that on. And then we could take our eyeballs and place those too. Now, before I place them on, I want to just kind of test it out. And again, hover a little over the cake and kind of move it around and see where you think it would be cute. And if the eyeballs should be this way or this way, I think it'll be good like that and like that. So you can just press it in, just gently. And then like the little like texture, it'll kind of come and encompass your fondant, so it'll look like it's really part of the face. And then we have these little dots that we made for accents, so you can place those wherever you want. Maybe I'll place a green one here, and we want to put some on the side as well. Okay, so you can see it from here. Put a big orange. Actually, we're going to put the horns there, so let me put this one over here. And then feel free to add more or less wherever you want. Okay. one right here. Okay, so now we have our sides of the monster decorated. And just one last thing is the horns. So now you can see, because we use the CMC powder just in that, like, oh, I just put purple buttercream on it. But now in that short amount of time, this got really hard. Now, if yours is still a little soft, feel free to just set it and let it rest for like half an hour or more or an hour more. But these should be firm enough if you made them similar size to me. So you can just go now and place it into your cake like that. And this one on this side. And if you need to adjust it, you can. If you want to make it further or closer, feel free to, because you can always just pipe over wherever you want. So I'm just going to move these a little bit further up. Okay, there we go. Like, super cute, super fun, super crazy monster cake. Hopefully yours came out really cute too. And hopefully you were able to see how fast you can bring, like, put together a simple cake like this, but really elevate whatever event or party you're having, because this is, it can be a centerpiece, and it'll be really fun for people to kind of just cut into and take a look at from all sides. They're going to enjoy the texture, the colors, the details that you made. Yeah, and it was a really fun project to do with you. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the sides. And hopefully you enjoyed it as well. If you have any questions, just let me know. We'll be here just for a little bit longer. But thank you so much for joining me in this class. Hopefully you enjoyed it and join me for the next one. All right, have a great Halloween, and hope you make this cake again soon. Bye.